Watch this vidcast or I'll gouge your eyes out.
First, you feel the pressure in your throat. Your eyes water and you start to taste something very, very sour in your mouth. Then it's like someone lights a match right in the middle of your chest and that fire grows. It fills your lungs and your throat and all the way behind your eyes. And finally, fire turns to ice. Like pins and needles of ice are sticking into your fingers, your toes, your arms. You see stars, then darkness. And the last thing you feel is cold. Welcome back, Horror Hounds, to Ghostman Rivera's Horror Show podcast.
I'm Mike Ghostman Pickle.
I'm James Rivera. So today we're going to be discussing creepy children in horror movies. So that quote that you heard at the beginning that I so eerily recited is from the film Ouija, Origin of Evil. Did it freeze your blood? I hope it did. Now, imagine that coming from the mouth of a child. How much creepier, how much more disturbing that quote would be. Then you get an idea of that scene in Ouija, Origin of Evil. What is it about creepy children in movies that gets to people? I personally think that it comes from a sense of disorder. I think that in a lot of movies, a lot of horror movies anyway, a lot of the villains are mostly like adults or they're killers, or you have your Jasons and your Michaels and your Freddys. And except for maybe Michael Myers, most of them have a reasonable origin story. Most of them you can understand why they became who they were, even if you don't agree with their actions and think that they're despicable people. But I think it upsets people's sense of balance and order when they see a child committing acts of evil the way that it doesn't in an adult. I think the idea is that children are supposed to be something that's pure and innocent. They're supposed to be untouched by the corruption and the evil of this world. So I feel like it upsets our sense of morality, our sense of being, our sense of place. I think that's part of the reason why it gets under people's skins more than adults. There's something a lot creepier about children than there is adults. And before you go on, one thing I have to say, think about this. What is scarier in The Shining? Is it Jack running around the hotel with an axe? Or is it the twin girls at the end of a hallway standing together and saying, "Come play with us, Danny, forever and ever and ever"? I think you know the answer to that.
Yeah, and in real life, what's the ultimate horror? Of something happening to a kid. Mm-hmm. So you take that ultimate horror of that and then you turn it on its head. And so what's the ultimate horror is when the other ultimate horror is those kids turning evil and them being the aggressors.
Yeah. And I think that's what makes it such an effective trope in horror, because it kind of dislodges our sense of right and wrong and kind of upsets the balance of what we understand as the nature of evil. And it makes people question if people can be born evil, if they're made that way. So I think that's why creepy children are always going to be an effective trope as long as horror exists.
Yeah, and it almost remains a trope too, because it's not as rich of a subgenre as we went over last week, which was supernatural films. And the creepy kid films, they're more peppered throughout the history of horror films, but there are some really standouts in there. And then you get some familiar tropes with each one. Like within the creepy kid subgenre, you get tropes like the parents are always oblivious, almost always.
Yep.
The mom almost always finds out first, and the dad doesn't believe her. A lot of times the horror begins after an adoption. So it explores the unknown nature of a strange child coming into your home, and what if that turns sinister. That happens a lot in these creepy kid movies. And a lot of the drama comes when one character finds out that the kids are murdering people and they can't convince the others. Because what are you going to do? Just start killing kids? You can't start killing these sinister kids, because to everyone else, you look like a child killer. Yeah. So that's a lot of drama that's brought into these. And then the bully kid snapping on their tormentors. If it's not that, it's a kid possessed by Satan, whether it's a baby or an older child. Or a dead kid who comes back for revenge. You got your tons of child spirits coming back for revenge. And you see a lot of harmless kids games and toys turning into weapons of murder. And then almost always the siblings of these kids often get the brunt of the punishment. So that's a lot of tropes that you'll see throughout all these movies.
It's the idea of seeing the things that are innocent. That's what makes the creepy kids in movies even more sinister, because when they use toys as weapons, we associate toys with happiness, with childhood, and with something different. And the creepy kids in movies manage to turn things that are supposed to be innocent and pure, put them on their head, and make them seem twisted and wrong. And I also think another valid fear, and I'm sure this is a fear from a lot of parents, is the idea that you might end up raising a child who is evil or psychotic or sociopathic, and there's nothing that you can do about it. And there's a lot of debates about nature versus nurture. We're not here to get into that, but these fears are very valid. They're very valid, and we have seen cases throughout history where certain children have acted in shockingly evil and malicious ways.
Yeah, and something about these movies too, that no matter how bad the kid is, no matter how evil it is, it's still really hard to see them be harmed.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's really hard to see a kid being harmed. I don't care if you see him kill 50 people throughout the film.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody comes up and chops his head off, you're gonna feel that chop more than an adult. Like kids and animals.
Yep. So let's kick it off, Michael.
So what we did this week, I wanted to get in depth and into a few of these films, but it's quite a few films throughout the year, so we're not going to have time to do that. So what we did is we took a few select movies that we hadn't seen yet, and we watched them this week. So we'll be discussing them in depth while we go through the history of all the standout kids movies, going all the way back to 1956. One of the most infamous killer kid movies, The Bad Seed, was directed by Mervyn LeRoy. He's also one of the directors of Wizards. And it was nominated for 4 Oscars, including Best Actress for Nancy Kelly, who played the mom, Best Supporting Actress for Eileen Heckart, who played Mrs. Daigle, and Best Supporting Actress for Pat Cormack, who played Bad Seed. It also got a nod for Best Cinematography from Harold Rawson. And it's about a housewife who suspects that her sweet little perfect daughter is a heartless killer, and secrets between the parents are revealed to be at the heart of the murders.
This is, to me,
so that was
a killer way to kick off the subgenre, or the trope, if you will, the Bad Seed. I got to see this movie when I was a kid. It was one of my grandparents showed it to me, and it immediately got under my skin. I think the acting is fantastic across the board. Who was it? And who is it who plays the little girl?
Patty McCormack.
Patty McCormack. Okay. I think she kind of set the standard for creepy kids to go forward in the future. She's convincing. The movie has a very good atmosphere. The storyline's a little bit unsettling. And I'm pretty sure 1950s, 1956, what was that, the Eisenhower era? Things were a lot different. America was in a very positive state of mind. On the surface, of course, there was a lot of turmoil going on underneath. So I think with the American values of the 1950s and the whole idea of the nuclear family being such a big driving force in culture at that time, must have made a movie like this seem particularly disturbing, because it goes and upsets the whole notion of the American dream and the perfect family and the white picket fence and the idea of having, children, hoping everything goes right the way you expect it to. This kind of just takes a lot of those ideas from that era and kind of knocks them down. And I think a lot of people could relate to this movie too, because I think in a lot of cases when children are psychotic, the parents are in denial.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily blame them either. I think it's hard for any parent to accept the idea that you might have raised, or if you're a mother, given birth to a demon.
Hold on here. Okay, I think you were done with what you were saying, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that set forth through generations after the Bad Seed. Every time somebody would have a bad, rambunctious kid, oh, that kid's the Bad Seed right there.
Yep. Kind of set the tone and the standard for bad kids movies.
Yeah, that's the hell of a way to kick off a subgenre. Then 4 years later, we got The Great Village of the Damned, one of the best creepy kid films ever, directed by Wolf Rilla. It's about, the story follows a story where everyone falls asleep in the middle of the day in a small English village, and a few months later, every woman in town is pregnant. All the children grow very fast, have the same blonde hair and weird eyes, and have the power to make people do whatever they want. Now, this was remade by John Carpenter in 1995, starring Christopher Reeve and Kirstie Alley, and also had Mark Hamill, who played Reverend George. Now, this one's a bona fide classic. Now, I love the John Carpenter remake. I always have. That was the first one I saw before I went back to see the original Village of the Damned. And the original just has, I don't know, just more class to it, more layers. It seems.
It came from the 1950s. I think being from that era and being able to, you know, exploit the more sensational elements of the story, they had to rely more on atmosphere and performances and acting.
Yeah, where John Carpenter's was more camp, more fun. Where this one was just class all the way. Mm-hmm. Then you had another classy one come up 6 years later, Kill Baby Kill, directed by the great Mario Bava. It's about a village that is haunted by a murderous ghost of a little girl, so a coroner and a medical student must uncover her secrets while a witch tries to protect the villagers.
Here's another interesting thing about this movie, Kill Baby Kill, we mentioned earlier. The creepy kid thing is more of a trope than a subgenre itself. This is actually considered a giallo film, a pre-Black Love, before the Black Love became the standard in giallo movies. So this was a giallo movie with a killer, with a child killer at its center.
Yeah, a ghost child killer. So you can't get away from it.
Yep.
And then the year after that it became a really underrated one. We've covered this one on the show already when we did a tribute to Sid Haig. It's Spider Baby from 1967. I looked all over the internet. This is on no one's creepy kids or killer kids list, and it should be. Written and directed by the great Jack Hill, who directed The Terror, The Big Dollhouse, Foxy Brown, among others. And it stars the great Lon Chaney Jr. and, of course, Sid Haig. And it's about a caretaker who devotes himself to 3 demented siblings after their father dies. Now, if you watch our show, our variety show on American Horse Channel, we did some skits where my daughter is being taught to kill by our host, Elliot. And in the culmination of the season 2, we had Sydney kill somebody off the street. She lures somebody in just like Spider Baby does, lures them off the street onto the porch and pulls them into the window.
It's a straight homage to Spider Baby in that scene, basically.
Exactly. And nobody notices it because nobody's seen Spider Baby. They should. Underseen
film. Check that one out. Offers a variety of creepy kids in there.
And
or grown kids too.
Yeah.
That's
another. If you want a more detailed discussion of that, look back in our old podcast and our Sid Haig tribute.
From about a year ago.
And we talk a lot about that. And then fast forwarding to the 70s, in 1974, we got It's Alive, one of my personal favorite killer kid movies growing up. It's written and directed by Larry Cohen, who also did The Stuff, Cue the Winged Serpent, and God Told Me To. And it's about an unsuspecting couple who have a baby that comes out as a monster who kills people when it's scared, and it scares easily. It's like a deformed little baby with teeth.
For me, it's typical Larry Cohen. It's a little bit of campy, a little goofy, a lot of fun, and very perverse. Exactly what you expect from a Larry Cohen movie.
Yeah, and it actually has some pretty scary parts.
I love that Larry Cohen was able to craft, sneak in some genuine scares amidst a lot of camp and really over-the-top concepts that don't really make sense when you stop and think about it. But he had a gift for making stuff like that seem palpable.
Yeah, and that demon baby was awesome.
Yeah.
A lot of times when they have demon babies like that, they either don't show the baby that much, or the baby's just kind of, they can't put a bunch of makeup on a baby. Yeah. So this one was just a straight puppet baby that would just attack the shit out of people, just wiggling all over, biting their necks. Oh, I love that one. That one was remade again. That one was remade years later also, but it's not even worth mentioning.
Would you say that the next development, which took a handful of years in the creepy kid subgenre trope, whatever you want to call it, is one of the defining ones?
Oh, yeah, for sure. the great Damien from The Omen, 1976, directed by Richard Donner, who did Superman, The Goonies, and Lethal Weapon, among many others. And it stars Gregory Peck and Lee Reminick. This one right here, it's gory than you think it's gonna. It's gorier than you think it's gonna be. It's scarier than you think it's gonna be. And of course, that classic scene when what is it? The teacher is at the window and said, "Damien, it's all for you," and she jumps to her death.
One of the best scenes in the history of horror. It's also amongst the classiest horror films in existence. A lot of it feels like this could have been an Oscar-winning picture in the 1970s with having somebody like Gregory Peck in there, the quality of acting. And I think there had been like the creepy kid subgenre before this thing. I think this is what really kicked it off into overdrive, because I think Damien arguably is the most iconic little creepy child in the history of horror movies. And I think after this, you saw the trend start to rise a lot faster.
Yeah, and I love movies like this where you see right from the first frame, you see this is going to be quality directing, quality acting. This is going to have some real scares. And then it makes it that much more shocking when it gets so visceral and bloody and violent.
Yep, one of the best. One of the best. It's one of the best creepy kids movies. It's one of the standout horror films of the 1970s, I would say.
And it's an infamous classic for a reason. And then this was also remade years later. And the remake was actually a really good, solid film, but it just does not hold a candle to the original Omen.
Not at all. But Mia Farrow was incredible.
Yes, she was. So the next one we got is the same year, 1976, Who Can Kill a Child? It's a movie from Mexico, directed by Narciso Ibanez Serrador. He's from Uruguay. It's about a couple of English tourists who arrive on an island where the children have killed all the adults. This is another one that had a remake that came out in 2012 called Come Out and Play, directed by someone who just calls himself Makinov. Mm-hmm. And that's another one that was a really good, solid remake. A lot of people didn't like it. And then when I saw Who Can Kill a Child, I see why they didn't like Come Out and Play. Because it's pretty much the same movie with a little less impact.
One of the things that this movie does well is the opening montage sequence, where it kind of shows you the level of violence that children are capable of. And it's all real footage, whether it's footage from the Holocaust and various different atrocities. I think that they were really driving that home in this one, and I think it was clever, disturbing, and exploitative all at the same time, to include real footage at the beginning to already unsettle the audience and remind them that, hey, kids do commit acts of evil.
And
accept it.
I like this one because it's crowds and crowds of killer kids, like on Village of the Damned. But in Village of the Damned, they were kind of separated from the violence because they could cause the violence with their minds. But with this one, it's just kids running around physically killing, like a big mob of killer kids.
Yep.
So that's got an extra layer of scariness for me. Now, the next movie coming up is another understated one that nobody talks about as a great killer kid movie, and this is one of the ones we watched this week. We'll give it a little more of an in-depth discussion. It's Alice, Sweet Alice. Again, this is from 1976. It's directed and co-written by Alfred Soule, and it stars Linda Miller, Brooke Shields, and Paula E. Shepherd as Alice. It's about a divorced Catholic couple who must deal with the possibility that their daughter Alice killed her little sister during her first communion. This sets off a series of stabbings that point to Alice, but things are not always what they seem.
This is one of the most clever and effective, if not also one of the crudest creepy children movies. There's one. A lot of the acts of violence that are perpetrated in this movie, you see it. You see relatively the little girl committing them, dressed up in a mask and costume, and they don't really hold back on terms of the knife stabbings, especially for a movie from 1976. They really go full throttle on what they can show and what they can get away with. I also think this is it's almost kind of a crude movie too, but I think that makes it more effective in the way it so bluntly deals with Alice's psychotic behavior. Also has a lot of clever misdirection in it, and I like that the movie, without spoiling it, comes to the conclusion that maybe Alice isn't necessarily responsible for everything, but that doesn't make her any less twisted, psychotic, or evil.
Yeah, and I love how it's a mystery, but it doesn't become a mystery until late in the movie because the viewer thinks, "Oh, I got this figured out." They make everything painfully obvious from the beginning. Like the movie opens with the small masked girl obsessively praying, and then she turns around with a blade in her hand. And then you keep seeing Alice with that mask on through the whole thing, and they make it so obvious that she's the killer, and you're mad at everyone who doesn't believe that she's the killer, and it's just plays around with your perceptions to the point where you don't know what the hell you don't see this twist coming at all.
Another way it plays with your perceptions is something that you mentioned earlier. There's something disturbing about little kids, and then what happens is when little kids are evil, it's still hard to see them like you said, being tortured or killed. Like a decapitation of a child in a movie is going to have a much more effect than an adult's, no matter how awful or how evil the child was. And this movie, for a good portion of its running time, goes out of its way to make the audience feel disgust towards Alice, to really not like her, to hate her, to see her as this evil little person. Yet there's moments in the movie where she's dealing with the landlord, and the landlord is creepy. He's a slob, he's a pig, and it's heavily suggested that he's a pedophile. And the moment he starts coming onto her and trying to victimize Alice, he does this under the pretense that he knows who she really is and he knows all about her. So he thinks that he can exploit that fact to try to molest her. And the scene is ugly. Alice does manage to get away through another scene that's actually also ugly. Like it explores so many conflicting emotions, especially in a scene like that, because you're on the one hand you're very disgusted with Alice, then you're disgusted.
Oh man! Oh, it just came back on.
Okay. So it really messes with your emotions because on the one hand you're disgusted with the guy. You're disgusted with Alice. You're disgusted by the treatment. You're disgusted by the suggested pedophilia. And I think the movie plays like a really clever trick on you by putting that scene there, because up until this point, you spend most of the time as an audience member hating Alice or becoming fearful of her. But then when you see her in a compromised position as a vulnerable child, your instinct is still to go to her side, even though you know she's evil. So this movie does a lot of toying with your head and toying with audience's emotions and the audience's feelings about childhood and things like that. So it does a lot of twisting and turning and misdirection, and I think the director was trying to make the audience feel conflicted about what's happening on screen.
And it works in so many details to tell you that the little girl's the killer. Like when the landlord, the fat, bald, creepy landlord, has her up against the wall and he's kind of grabbing on her, so she grabs his cat, and she grabs it like in a mean way and then tries to hurt it. Mm-hmm. And then the next thing you know, when the cat's dead, you think, of course the little girl did it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's what makes that scene particularly disturbing. Because like earlier, you hate Alice because you know she's an evil little creature. Then you hate the guy for being a pedophile and coming onto her, and then you see her as a child. So you go from hating her to seeing her as a child and wanting to protect her. But the instant that she grabs the cat, which I guess in this situation is still kind of justified, it's such an ugly and violent act that the audience goes from hating her to sympathizing with her back to being reminded of how evil she is right at the end of it all.
I love the character of the aunt that gets stabbed on the stairs, because she, along with the audience, is convinced 100% that this little girl is doing it. And then you despise the mom because she won't listen to the aunt. Like, listen to her, your little girl's a killer. And then before you know it, and by the way, that stabbing on the stairs is probably the most brutal out of the whole movie. Mm-hmm. But the most, even though that was the most brutal killing, I think the most disturbing killing is when Brooke Shields gets killed at her first communion. Mm-hmm. And her little limp body's being dragged across the church floor. But everybody's in church. Everybody's praying in her communion. And then sliding down the side aisle out of everybody's perception is Brooke Shields being dragged across the floor and put into a little box. That was pretty disturbing.
there's a lot of stuff in this movie that's kind of upsetting. It's definitely, I'm pretty sure this was marketed as an exploitation film. Definitely has that feel to it, but it does a good job of really exploring ideas in a way that makes the audience feel really uncomfortable by confronting you with imagery that most people don't want to see in horror movies. Most people don't want to see, even gorehounds don't want to see children being killed or ripped up.
Yeah.
They want to see adults. And even though while the killing of Brooke Shields is fairly restrained, I would say, it's hard to make it soften the blow of it because it's a little child. And I think what makes the scene disturbing is also the reactions of all the adults, the horrified look when they realize that this little girl was brutally murdered. So a lot of stuff in it that makes people uncomfortable. Like, I had to say this is a really good exploitation movie, but if you're one of those people or if you're one of those parents who's not comfortable with seeing kids in danger or seeing kids portrayed in a certain way, this might be one that you might want to skip. It's a very uncomfortable movie.
Yeah, it is. And I love the little curveballs it throws you. Like, what about that curveball when Alice is like the police are now convinced, just like we are, and just like the aunt is, the police are convinced that it's a little girl too. So they put Alice up on a lie detector test. And in the lie detector, she says that the killer is her dead sister. And she's telling the truth. So you don't know what the fuck to think after that. Like, you start questioning everything you've seen before that. Like, could it be supernatural? Could it be her little sister doing this?
See, I never did. At first, when she said her sister and she believed that it was her sister, my instant reaction was like, this girl is obviously disturbed in the head if she actually believes that. For all we know, she could be manifesting more than one personality. And of course, losing your sister would be a traumatic event. So for all I was thinking, maybe it's manifesting in a new psychotic personality that she doesn't remember. So even at that point, the movie is so directed that I was convinced that somehow that was explainable. But then the movie kind of keeps turning things on your head as it goes along.
Well, Alice also had some great moments of vulnerability, though,
Mm-hmm.
where you kind of seen the scared little girl come out for a second, and then she's a tough little girl too. So the scared little vulnerable girl will come out, and then she'll cut that feeling off, and she'll get mean again because she seems to have a defense mechanism within her, where when she starts feeling emotions, which she starts hurting, she does something mean.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really conflicted throughout the whole thing. And then there's deceiving shots and scenes throughout the whole thing that makes you question what you think is obvious. And then it just turns everything on its head at the end. And what about those, I won't give any details, but the confessional scenes at the end,
Mm-hmm.
when you find out what the twist is, and then there's a really tense scene in the confessional where we know who the killer is, and then other characters like the priest and stuff tries to figure it out, and it's this tense kind of suspenseful waiting game with shots back and forth where you wonder if the killer's going to kill somebody else before they can get to her. It's really cool.
Yeah. This one is available. Where is this available at? Did we watch it on Amazon? Did I watch this on Amazon Prime or Shudder?
This was on Amazon Prime, yeah.
Amazon Prime, yeah. This is one that I'm glad doing this podcast gave me an excuse to watch it, because I've seen the pictures of the images from this movie before many times. I've seen that image of the little girl in the yellow jacket and that creepy-ass mask that she's wearing several times before. And I think I've actually passed by this movie and it's been recommended to me in like Amazon. And I just finally gave me a chance to watch it. And I liked it a lot. And I'm surprised you don't really hear too much about this movie these days. I've never heard anybody talk about Alice, Sweet Alice when it comes to a lot of kill. I've heard people talk about The Bad Seed, The Good Son. This one seems to slip under people's radars, and I think it's because it has a very non-mainstream feel, and it's more transgressive than most movies that we're accustomed to about creepy children. But, so it's definitely I'd say that the reason you don't hear about it as much, it doesn't really fall within, I would say, like within the parameters of taste for most mainstream audiences.
And it's an awesome outfit for a killer too. I love the parka with the mask and everything. It looks scary, and then it paints itself like a typical slasher, and then it begins like a slasher, and a lot of it follows the formulas of a slasher, and then it just completely messes with your perceptions and takes it in a whole different direction. That's what really surprised me about it and impressed me.
Yeah, I think that's what impressed me too, and also the straightforward and blunt depiction of the material, of the content that's in this movie. It doesn't pull any punches, and the director does not seem like he was concerned with trying to make the audience feel comfortable and hold their hands. It's definitely one that I can picture turning a lot of people off. Again, there's more disturbing horror movies in this, but I think just the nature of it being about a child and the things that we see is going to turn a lot of people off. And I'm pretty sure the pedophilia suggestions in the movie are going to also make a lot of people uncomfortable.
Yeah, but if you start watching it and you think it's one thing, just keep watching it to the end. It becomes something totally different.
Yep. A standout subgenre, and another example of how varied these creepy kids movies are, because this one's an exploitation movie. At least that's the way I see it.
Now, another huge standout that gets plenty of recognition, especially recently, it seems to be getting a lot more recognition lately. It's The Brood from 1979, written and directed by David Cronenberg. It stars Oliver Reed and Samantha Eggar. And it's about a series of brutal murders points to a group of anger babies who kills anyone that upsets their mother. This is another one that we've discussed on the podcast a few times.
Yeah, I love this one. Definitely one of the best. Another example of how varied these films are, because now this is the creepy children in a body horror movie.
Yeah. And that's another one that gets better and better each time you watch it.
Mm-hmm.
And each time they restore it and make it better with the Blu-ray, oh my God, it just gets better and better. The better and more crystal clear you can see the picture, it just gets better and scarier. Because I used to love the gritty nature of it, but I just had a whole new appreciation of it when it was fine-tuned and restored, mm-hmm. and it still holds that same magic, the same visceral scares, and the little brood kids are these deformed little kids are just creepy as hell.
And it has one of the most disgusting climaxes I could think of in any horror movie. Something that's perverted, wrong, shocking, and completely turns the idea of motherhood and raising children all upside down on its head. And I agree, it gets better with age. I feel like before of David Cronenberg's films, you heard people talk about this less. I heard people talking about The Fly more, or Videodrome, or even Crash, which is a cult movie, but I've heard more people speak about that. I've noticed in recent years the reputation of this one has gone way up.
Yeah, for good reason too. It's so good.
Now, before you get to the next one, which I already know it is, one mention, another entry in the creepy kid subgenre came a year later. It was The Shining. And that one does it in multiple ways. It's the twins are creepy. The Grady twins, who we interviewed on the podcast. If you want to check that out, check out our Shining special from just a couple months ago. And, of course, Danny himself. Danny is pretty creepy throughout the movie, even though ultimately he's the hero of the movie, and I view him as the protagonist. The whole Danny, having his friend Tony who lives in his head, the things that he says, the whole rad ram, spelling it out, him holding the knife, definitely falls into that creepy kid subgenre. Even though the creepy kid is actually a good kid.
Yeah. So the next one we watched this week that we're going to analyze a little bit is one that I've loved since the 80s. I watched it on TV when I was little. The Children from 1980. It's actually a trauma film directed by Max Kalamachowicz. And it stars Gil Rogers as Sheriff Billy Hart and Martin Shakar as John. And it's about a leak from a nuclear power plant turns a busload of children into murderous zombies with black fingernails. Now, I adore this movie. This is another one that gets better with each rewatch. It was restored by Vinegar Syndrome, which you can see when they have some pieces that were lost footage where they had to get the original and throw it in there, but so it's a little uneven where the picture gets a little less quality for a little bit and then goes back to the restored version.
Well, the version I saw was not the restored version. I saw the one that was all scratchy and messed up. I watched it for free on an app called Filmways. And I would not recommend watching on that app because it is loaded with commercials and it's fucking annoying. It took me, I think, over two and a half 3 hours to get through an hour and a half movie.
Oh yeah, so definitely get the Vinegar Syndrome Blu-ray on this one. Pressure drop right at the beginning, and then cut to a school bus full of kids and going into a yellow fog, and you know what's going to happen after that.
You know, what I found weird about this one is that it definitely has like the feel of a trauma film, the personality of a trauma film, and kind of like that trashy subject matter with what they go for. Is it me, or did it feel less campy than most trauma movies feel? I could feel the cheapness and the low budget DIY, but I feel like this movie takes itself a little bit more seriously. As ridiculous as the premise is and as ridiculous as a lot of the happenings are, I feel like a lot of it is played straight face, or am I wrong in perception?
Yeah, there's a sincerity in this that's underlying through the whole thing, especially the Sheriff Billy.
Mm-hmm.
He's really sincere, and then throughout the movie, you see him get more and more scared shitless and panicking.
Mm-hmm.
And it's pretty natural the way he acts.
Yeah, I like the concept of this movie. On the one hand, I don't think it makes complete sense because you know how they get trapped. Was it like yellow fog or what it was like that makes them like that? So are they mindless after? Do they become monsters? Are they actively seeking to hurt people? Or are they innocent children just walking around saying mommy, daddy, and killing their parents by accident? That's my question. Are these children truly sinister? Or are they zombified? I don't know if I was ever clear on that.
Yeah, I think they're sinister because especially when all the kids do the same thing. Like sometimes they're like that one really scary part where it's the three kids together out on the lawn, and they all start saying "mommy" at the same time. So it's this chorus of "mommy" repeating.
So all that nuclear waste made them not just toxic to touch, but like evil in the brain.
Yeah, and they just want to kill these people. So it's these mindless kids walking around with their arms out, mommy, daddy, and then when they hug their parents, they actually like burn them and they become disfigured. So it's really good makeup too, and when the parents became disfigured, or when the adults did.
Excellent makeup and pretty original too, because I don't know of any other horror movie where the antagonists kill people by touching them and melting them like that. So it definitely puts a different type of makeup, different type of gore makeup than you're used to seeing in movies. You're used to seeing slashings or stabbings or people being gutted or decapitations. Look how fucking morbid we are. But
yeah.
This one, it's people who are basically kind of melting. I like
it.
it.
And I love how we get to know the parents of all these children as the sheriff goes searching for the kids. Because he doesn't know what the hell's going on at first, so he just goes to each of the he knows, because it's a small town, so he knows each of the kids' parents, so he goes to each of their houses, and some of the parents don't care about their kids, some of the parents care a little bit too much, they're a little overprotective, so it's a really good contrast of all the different parents in town. And then
it's surprising they would put that in a movie like this. They would put that much thought into trying to make it realistic, because in real life, different parents have different levels of involvement in their children's lives, and obviously some parents care more than others do.
Yeah, and then the sheriff gets so desperate that he goes around and starts deputizing the townsfolk, and then you got Hank and Frank, the bald twins that were the comic relief. They're hilarious. The only thing I didn't like is that they didn't follow through and show what happened to Hank and Frank. Because I like those guys.
Yeah.
Just two giggling bald brothers, like being perverted and teasing the deputy for having a girlfriend. And
Yeah.
So I wish we'd have seen what happened to them.
Yeah, I think that's where most of the camp in the movie comes from, is from those characters.
And then a lot of the scary parts were I love the creepy handheld camera that would be behind the kids as they approach their parents or something with their arms out.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that feeling of that handheld close behind them where you can just see the kid's arms reached out like that. And then when you finally see the sheriff, he starts realizing that it's the kids doing the killing. So he just starts shooting him like a duck shoot and shit.
Mm-hmm.
And then the mom of one of the kids comes and bashes him over the head. She's like, "No, you're killing the babies."
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of interesting scenes like that.
And it's one of those interesting scenes in movies like this where one character finds out that these are killer kids, so he's trying to do what it takes to get rid of them, and then another character is oblivious and comes in, "Oh no, don't kill the kids."
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was really cool. But the one that does it, John's wife,
Mm-hmm.
she was really distracting how dumb she was. She had that weird deep voice whenever she got upset,
Mm-hmm.
and she kept yelling at her husband and yelling at the sheriff for hurting the kids. And she sees them killing people, and she sees the aftermath of them mutilating people.
See, that's where I think you start to see some of Trauma's roots in this movie with a character like that. I don't think the performance was particularly good, and it seemed like the actress wasn't even sure how to approach the character. And that's probably because the character is haphazardly written in the first place, so it's probably hard for an actress to even get on a grip on what exactly they were going for with that character.
Yeah. But my favorite scene in the whole movie, and this is one that stuck with me, like when I watched it again, it took me back to when I was 8 years old watching it for the first time. It's when John's son is not infected because he wasn't on the bus.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the killer kids climbs up to his window, scratching on his screen. So he just oblivious comes and lets him in. And you think, oh, the kid's going to come in and kill the kid. But no, the kid starts running around hiding under the bed like he thinks he's playing,
Mm-hmm.
while the zombie kid is trying to kill him. So it's just that tension
Mm-hmm.
of that scene.
Yeah.
That, the little kid is oblivious, and you think this little kid's going to die any minute. And you don't think they're going to go through with it, but shit.
They go through with it.
Yeah. But another thing I noticed about this movie, it's a really well-structured all-night ordeal. You really feel the passage of time. They find the bus, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you see the passage of time as they investigate with all the parents.
Mm-hmm.
And then by the time they find out that the kids are killing, it's nighttime.
Mm-hmm.
So then you get this passage of time. You feel the passage of time and the exhaustiveness of these characters as they go all night fighting these kids. And then the sun comes up the next morning. And then as the sun comes up, it kind of eases into the climax, and it's a slow, intense reveal at the end.
Mm-hmm.
And it's this really good ending, and then silence
Mm-hmm.
during the final credits.
Yeah.
And speaking of the silence, throughout the whole movie, there's no dated music. It's just creepy score and strings.
It's pretty sparse.
Yeah.
The approach to the music is pretty sparse. And I guess that turns out to be probably was the wiser choice, because I think if they put more intrusive score, it probably would have aged more poorly and made the movie seem more campy. But it's things like that, like you mentioned, the ending, the silence and stuff like that, whereas like you see the trauma roots definitely peeking through this movie, but it separates itself by trying to treat it more serious. And it's moments like that, like the ending that you're talking about, that kind of make this, to me, stand apart from a lot of the campier trauma films.
Yeah.
I think it doesn't have its traces of camp, but I think it's trying to treat this fairly sincerely, like you said.
Yeah, so if you're curious about this movie and want to check out what it's all about, look on Film Rise and watch it for free. But like James said, it's the old version. It's not restored. And it's got tons of commercials. So if you're really curious about it, order it from Vinegar Syndrome. You won't be disappointed by this one.
Yes. So if you're a collector, get the Vinegar Syndrome or rent it. If you're a cheap ass like me, check out Film Rise.
And then a year later, we got another one we've discussed on the podcast before. As you've seen, we go through this list of killer kid movies. We've talked about a lot on the podcast, so it must be a subgenre that we really like. It's Bloody Birthday from 1981, directed and co-written by Ed Hunt. It's about 3 children are born during an eclipse, and then 10 years later, they band together to kill everyone around them.
So this is another example of creepy kids going to different. So this one, different subgenres. This one is a straight up slasher movie, and as a slasher movie fan, everybody knows me. I fucking love slasher movies. It's one of the giddiest and one of the most entertaining. What I love about slasher movies is how perverse and how wrong they are, and how they could, especially in the 80s, how they kind of push boundaries. This one took it a step further because they were already starting to push boundaries with the type of sex and nudity and the connection between violence and sex that they were pushing in these movies. To put that and add a kid into it, because the kids, one of the kids kills a teenage girl who is changing the way that they put arrows through. So a lot of stuff this is another one that's gonna make people uncomfortable, but the kills are pretty inventive. The kids are creepy, but they're kind of fun at the same time too. Since this is more of like since I don't take slasher movies as seriously, there's something a little bit giddy or dangerous, or dare I say a little bit dirty, about using kids to carry out such horrific acts and do it with such glee. And the fact that it's not necessarily like a totally serious movie, I think is going to unsettle more people. But it's definitely one of the most playful 80s slasher movies. Sure, definitely left an impression on me.
And especially the little blonde girl, because in contrast to little idiot boys who just seem to be doing it for the glee, for the fun of it, she's diabolical about it. She's intelligent, she's calculated, she's mature.
Yep.
You know?
So definitely one of the best ones to check out, Bloody Birthday.
Yeah, and I'll just say, I mean, we're going through a lot of movies, and we're not just mentioning every kid movie. There's a lot of killer kid movies we aren't mentioning. We're mentioning ones. So if you hear us mention it on this show, it's really good.
Mm-hmm. I might disagree about the next one, but...
Yeah, I was going to say, James might disagree about the next one, but it is a bona fide classic. Children of the Corn from 1984. Directed by Fritz Kirsch, who did Tough Turf a couple of years later with James Spader. Mm-hmm. And it stars Linda Hamilton, Peter Horton, and John Franklin in an awesome performance as Isaac, and Courtney Gaines as Malachi. It's based on a novel, of course, by Stephen King, and it's about a young couple who is trapped in a remote town where a religious cult of kids believe that everyone over 18 must be killed. And there's actually 9 Children of the Corn movies in all. I've only seen this one. So if anybody knows of any of the others that are any good, let us know, so we'll watch them.
Maybe we'll do a special on it. Yeah, this is one of those movies that as a kid I loved. I was like a big fan of it, and like a lot of like horror movies from childhood I revisit and I still love it, and the magic is still there, and like nostalgia kicks in. This is not one of those movies. I don't think this is aged particularly well. I'll be honest with you, seeing it again, I don't think any of the performances are particularly good or menacing or scary at all. It's pretty iconic. It's very iconic. The name conjures up so many memories, and it's the story itself is kind of genius. It is kind of genius. You got to give a lot of the credit to Stephen King. But here's the thing. I think that this should be remade. This is one of those movies that I think is due for a remake, because I'm convinced that there is a more effective way to pull off this fantastic Stephen King story. That's just my opinion. I know a lot of people have nostalgia for it, but this is one of those ones that doesn't hold up for me at all. Like, I had a hard time sitting through it last time. It seemed a little wooden for my taste, but I do think that it's a movie with a lot of story potential, so somebody should remake it. Stop remaking all of these fantastic pieces of cinema, all these great horror movies. Remake this, because it's a classic already, but I do think there's improvements to be made.
Well, I think one of the 9 films is a remake, but I think it's just one of those straight to video, get a whatever director to do it, do the cash grab. Nobody ever gave it any care.
Deserves a real remake, because I'm pretty sure this title is iconic enough to draw people to movie theaters. I don't see it being any less iconic than, say, something like Pet Cemetery. I feel like a lot of people, it became kind of shorthand. For years, it was shorthand for twisted children, or everybody wanted to refer to children as evil or anything. People would call them the children of the corn.
Yeah, there's a lot about this. You know, it does have a campy quality to it, but and I do realize that a lot of what I love about this movie is the nostalgia. I just love the little John Franklin as Isaac, his little munchkin voice. He who walks behind the rose. And then Malachi, the redheaded bastard Malachi. Outlander!
See, that's a little thing. That kid did not scare me. I just wanted to punch him in the face. I was like, oh, come on. Ain't no way that little kid is going to be getting anything up on me.
That is one thing about this movie. There's quite a few scenes where you're telling the adults, just wreck those kids, dude.
Yeah,
just wreck them.
Kick them.
They spend way too much time hesitating. Should we kill these murderous little bastards?
Like,
Nah.
yeah,
You should.
yeah, the answer is yes. And the next one is also Stephen King, isn't it?
Yeah, another Stephen King one, Firestarter, from the same year. Directed by Mark L. Lester, who directed Commando. And then a few years later, he directed one of my favorite cheesy action films from the 90s, Showdown in Little Tokyo with Brandon Lee. But it's a Stephen King story starring Drew Barrymore, David Keith, Heather Locklear, Martin Sheen, George C. Scott, Art Carney. Very impressive cast. It's about a couple involved in an experiment that gives them telepathic abilities, but they have a child who is psychokinetic. And John Carpenter was supposed to direct this, but it was taken away from him after the failure of The Thing.
That's too bad. I don't remember this movie too clearly. I did see it as a kid. I remember liking it, so I can't say how it holds up compared to Children of the Corn. But like I said, it's been a long time. I'm pretty sure I remember being impressed with Drew Barrymore's performance.
Yeah, I like this movie. I like the performance of Drew Barrymore. It's been a while since I've seen it, but I remember liking it a lot. But also remember it being similar to Carrie because it's a Stephen King movie about a telekinetic kid and everything like that. So it kind of got over the years got overshadowed by Carrie. Where if I'm going to watch a movie like this of that time, I'm going to watch Carrie instead of Firestarter again. So
that makes sense. I could definitely see that.
And then just a few years after that, we get yet another creepy kid Stephen King movie, Pet Cemetery from 1989, directed by Mary Lambert and a screenplay by Stephen King himself. It's about a couple whose son is killed and the father finds a cursed burial ground that brings the dead back to life. Miko Hughes as Gage. We mentioned him last week. He was in A New Nightmare. Dale Midkiff and Denise Crosby played Lewis and Rachel Creed. And the great Fred Gwynn as Judd Crandall.
I give a shout out to my cousin Gage. My cousin Gage was named after Gage from Pet Cemetery.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's cool.
That's where the name came from. Yeah, this one's another good one. This one's a classic. I think it still holds up to this day. And if you're interested in the story and you don't want to read the book, you want to watch the movie, watch this one. Do not watch the remake.
Yes.
Unless you're really desperate, unless you've already seen the first one and you're okay, it's not something that I would recommend. I think the story was done so well the first time that the remake was not really necessary.
And if you want to hear us discussing this story further, we bring this movie up when we discuss our favorite Stephen King films. So go back to our Stephen King episode. We talk about that quite a bit. This actually made the top of my list of my favorite Stephen King films.
Yes.
And we also discussed the remake, which we both loathed. And then we discussed the remake again when our friend Will Walker re-edited it and made us like it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a very interesting thing about that movie. So if you want to watch a good remake of Pet Sematary, you'll have to talk to Will Walker.
We'll put a link in the comment, and we'll put a link in the description for that.
Okay. And then in that same year was another trauma film about killer kids that flew under the radar, and it's panned by critics. Critics hate it.
It's a trauma. Of course it is.
Yeah. So don't listen to the low score on IMDb, but Beware Children at Play from 1989 is an awesome little film directed by Mick Cribbin. And Mick Cribbin was actually a first-time director, but he was a sound engineer for Spider-Man and American Gangster and a bunch of other movies. But it's about a mentally disturbed teenager who brainwashes kids into being cannibalistic psychos. And like the one guy's, it was one of those trailers where it has a creepy voiceover, like a deep voice guy. And you got to see this trailer because the deep voice guy says, "The only way to discipline your children is with a 12-gauge shotgun."
Wonderful parenting advice.
That's a perfect testament of what to expect from this movie. It's bloody, gory, and has great kills.
I've never seen this one before, but I'm pretty sure I have a good idea of what it's going to be like when I finally tune in and watch it.
It's really messy, really campy, really goofy, but damn, it's chaotic, and the kills are great. It's got a great trauma spirit to it. So just kind of one of those with reckless abandon. Let's kill all these bastards. No hesitation. All right, the next one we're going to discuss, I think this one's a bit underrated as well. We're going to discuss this one because we watched it, just watched it this week.
I actually did not get the chance to watch it. I apologize.
Oh, okay. So this one's Mikey from 1992. It's directed by Dennis Dempster. It's starring Brian Bonsall as Mikey. Great little performance by that creepy little kid. The mom is played by Wes Craven's wife, Mimi Craven. And the dad is John Deal. And also in this movie is the great Josie Bissett from, I don't know if you remember her. She's the blonde from Melrose Place. I always had a big crush on her.
I have not seen that in years.
She plays the younger girl who was the crush of the little boy. Mm-hmm. And then his teacher is played by Ashley Lawrence from Hellraiser. Oh. It's about a seemingly sweet and innocent foster boy who kills everyone who crosses him, and in his new home sets his sights on a neighbor girl he has a crush on and will kill anyone who stands in his way. Now this one, different from the other, there's no subtlety here. Mm-hmm. It's a slasher film. We see the kid kill in the first scene and for several scenes after. And the question is, will the dumb adults ever figure it out? Of course.
What do you prefer? What's better, this or Bloody Birthday?
Bloody Birthday's still better than this one, but this one is better as far as structure. It seems more like a big budget movie. It had Hand That Rocks the Cradle vibes to me.
Okay.
It's like it's kind of slick, but with
so it's a classier film than Bloody Birthday.
Yeah, and
okay.
And it comes off as classier and maybe a little more innocent, but then the kills seem almost out of place to how innocent the movie feels. So the kid drowns someone in a pool. He electrocutes a few characters, bashes one upside the head with a bat, bashes another one with a hammer, and then turns around to the claw and starts hitting them with a claw hammer. He kills someone with a slingshot, a bow and arrow, and a fucking Molotov cocktail. He makes a Molotov cocktail and tosses it with one of the characters.
Sounds pretty. So basically, they're juxtaposing upsetting material with something a little bit more childlike and innocent. Do you think that makes the childlike scenes more disturbing? I think so. Mikey is.
Yeah, and then the kills are pretty outrageous. Like I explained all the different types of kills there were. But there's one or two of them that look a little fake, a little faked out kill. Mm-hmm. But other ones, in a stark contrast, some of the other ones are pretty disturbing, especially the bat upside the head. And then I love when you see him bash one character upside the head. He gets with his new parents, and the dad sees that he has a glove with a ball in it. He said, "Oh, you like to play catch?" And the kid's like, "I'm a better hitter." So, this kid's got jokes. So he's not only killing people, he's joking about it. Mm-hmm. And then he's got another joke later on where he tells this one character, "Could you teach me one more thing? how to die.
So it's a
So
lot.
it's got, you know, it's a good quality movie, but it has the outrageous kills, and then some of those one-liners like that is pretty cool. But I love how the kid manipulates everyone with his innocent demeanor, including the therapist. So he's smart. So it's a little distracting when the kid's smart enough to manipulate all these adults, but he's not smart enough to hide what he does. He's kind of proud what he does. He sits in his room watching videotapes of his kills, and his parents walk in. Oh, what you watching, little guy? Oh, I'm watching a horror movie. Oh, you shouldn't be watching horror movies. So they turn the TV off without realizing he's watching a real kill. But it's a lot of scenes like that where the boy goes from really cleverly hiding his weird evil to being ridiculously obvious. And then the characters slowly start to figure it out one by one after denying it. And then it's one of those really frustrating movies where especially the mom and dad deny it all the way to the end. And then the mom finally figures it out and the dad won't believe her. He just thinks she's going hysterical. And it's really frustrating on this one because this is a new kid that came into your house. You don't know what his past is. And then you find out that his last foster family was all killed. So you still, even though you don't know this kid and you don't know his past, you still refuse to believe that he did anything sinister. So besides those few flubs here and there, it's a really solid movie. I like it. I highly recommend Mikey from 1992. It's also on Amazon Prime.
The next one is actually one of my favorite bad seed movies or bad kid films.
This is one of my personal favorite too, even though it isn't quite a horror film, but it's got a creepy enough kid to be one of the best, I think. It's directed by The Good Son, 1993, directed by Joseph Rubin. He also directed Dreamscape, The Stepfather, Sleeping with the Enemy, Money Train, and also The Forgotten. It's a drama thriller, but it's very dark and has an undeniably evil performance from Macaulay Culkin. And it also stars Elijah Wood, Wendy Crewson, and David Morse. It's about a young boy who stays with his aunt and uncle and befriends his cousin, but soon proves that he is psychotic.
This is one of Macaulay Culkin's best performances, I think. This was like a few years after Home Alone. And of course, he was like the biggest child actor in the world at that point. But I think this one really proved his acting chops because he's convincingly psychotic in this movie. He's convincingly evil. And the character possesses a kind of maturity that suggests somebody who's quite older than he actually is. So credit has to be given to Macaulay Culkin for infusing a sense of maturity into the character that technically Macaulay Culkin should not have even been possessed at that age, which I think makes the performance even more impressive. And of course, Elijah Wood is also awesome in this one as his scared, frightened, cousin. This one I've liked this movie since childhood. I was shown this movie a long time ago, and it's one of my favorites of these types of films. And I guess I could see it's not as downright horror as some other bad seed movies, but I still consider it a horror film.
And this is a horror film that I've showed to a lot of horror fans over the years that Macaulay Culkin and Elijah Wood movie, and they think it's they think it's going to be tame, but then they're always impressed by Macaulay Culkin's performance. And the whole movie as a whole is pretty realistic. I mean, it's realistic in its depiction of the violence. It's realistic in its depiction of the interaction between the kids, between the adults and the kids, and it's believable that because Macaulay Culkin, his character is very good at hiding what he's doing. So it's believable that these kids wouldn't believe little Elijah Wood when he comes and says that he's sinister, that he's a killer. Yeah, they don't believe him. They think he's just being pissy with this kid, like they're just fighting or something.
Yeah.
So it's all realistically portrayed in this one.
Definitely one of the best.
So nothing campy about that one for sure. That one's really effective. And then a few years later, in 1998, we get Ringu. It's a Japanese film directed by Hideo Nakata. It's about a cursed videotape that kills the viewer 7 days after watching it by unleashing the vengeful, murderous spirit of a little girl named Sadako. This was remade by Gore Verbinski a few years later. He's the director of Pirates of the Caribbean and A Cure for Wellness. It was in 2002, and it starred Naomi Watts, and the spirit's name was changed to Samara. And as we discussed before, we discussed this last week on the Supernatural episode, and I think we both agreed that the remake might be slightly better than the original on this one.
Yeah. I know I'll probably get shit for that because I fully expected to like the original more when I finally watched it about a month ago, but it might be that I'm so familiar with the story beats of everything that I think being so familiar with the original Ring and then seeing everything like happen the way that it plays out, I knew the story too well. And then I noticed that the Ring, the American version, actually incorporates a lot of elements from Ring 2, like the later mythology that's not present in the first Ringu, because it came out after there was already a sequel, so it already incorporates more of the mythology than the first Japanese version did. So to me, it felt like more complete movie, but I'll concede that might just be because I saw the Ring years before and seen it many times before finally checking out Ringu.
Cool. The next one brings us into the 2000s. In 2001 was The Devil's Backbone. It's a movie from Mexico written and directed by Guillermo del Toro. It's about Carlos, a 12-year-old boy who loses his father in the Spanish Civil War, and he's sent to a creepy boys' orphanage that is haunted and has many dark secrets he must uncover through communication with the ghost of another young boy who torments him at night, saying that they are all going to die. The situation is made even more tense by an unexploded bomb ticking away in the middle of the orphanage.
Yeah.
This one has got to be one of the scariest, if not the scariest, creepy kid movies, because it's one of those where the little boy ghost is scary as hell. He is deliberately scary as hell, but he's also trying to deliver a message.
Mm-hmm.
So he's trying to deliver a message by being scary as hell. And then you have that constant tension of the ticking bomb throughout the film.
One of those ones where the creepy kids are not actually the evil ones, though.
Yeah. It's very creepy, very atmospheric. And as far as I'm concerned, Guillermo del Toro at his best.
I agree.
And definitely the scariest. He should definitely do more films like this.
Mm-hmm.
And the year after that, we got Ju-on the Grudge. It's from Japan, written and directed by Takeshi Shimutsu. It's about the mysterious and vengeful spirits of a murdered mother, Kayako, and her son, Toshio. They mark and pursue anyone who dares step foot in their cursed home. This is another one that was just remade that was completely panned by critics, but you and I liked it, but you and I seen the remake at an early screening, unedited, and we enjoyed it. And then neither one of us have seen it since it came out in the theaters, right?
So I have no idea if the movie's even the same thing from the one that we watched. And
yeah, so I think they might have did something to it.
I've never seen the original Ju-on the Grudge. I will try to correct that sometime before the year ends.
I saw it this last year. Really good, really solid scares.
Mm-hmm.
I think both Ringu and the remake of The Ring are both a little more impressive than The Grudge. Mm. But it's just there's something about that story in the house and the little kid going.
Yeah.
So it's definitely got a lot to love about it. The next one's from 2006. It's a French film that flew way under the radar. It's Them, or in French, it's Ils. Written and directed by David Moreau and Xavier Palude. Mm-hmm. They were the two directors of the Eye remake with what's her name? Who was in the remake of the Eye?
I don't know.
She was in Idle Hands. I forgot her name. But anyway, they did the remake of The Eye, which I thought was pretty good. And it's about a couple staying in a peaceful, isolated country house, and they're tormented all night by a group of hooded teenagers. This one's free on IMDb TV.
Mhm.
Little indie film. It comes off very much like a home invasion film,
Mhm.
but it's one of those survive the night type of movies with a constant attack from the outside.
Mhm.
So that one's really good, really creepy and atmospheric. Another one flew under the radar that same year was Wicked Little Things in 2006, directed by J.S. Cardone. It's part of the 8 Films to Die For, starring Laurie Hearing, Scout Taylor Compton from Rob Zombie's Halloween movies, Chloe Grace Moretz, who we've mentioned quite a few times, who was in the remake of Carrie, and Jeffrey Lewis from Devil's Rejects. Karen and her daughters Sarah and Emma moved to a small town in Pennsylvania where in 1913 a horrible mining accident buried a group of children alive, and they are still alive, attacking people and eating them.
Wicked.
Now that one's low budget. The low budget shows, but I think it's really creepy, and the kids are scary as hell. It's kind of feels like Plague Town, but I personally like Plague Town a lot more. But
Mhm.
this one's definitely a good one. And another one of my favorite creepy kid movies of all time comes up 2 years later.
Mhm.
Let the Right One In. It's a movie from Sweden, directed by Thomas Alfredson, written by John A.D. Lindquist, based on his novel. An ignored and bullied young boy, Oscar, finds love and revenge in a girl named Ellie, who turns out to be a vampire. This is another one that was remade in 2010, the movie Let Me In, with Chloe Grace Moretz and Elias Koteas, and directed by Matt Reeves, who directed Cloverfield. And I think I mentioned this on the podcast before. Let Me In is a good, solid movie because it was based on a good movie, but it was too much of throwing a budget
Mhm.
at low-budget inventive ideas,
Mhm.
and it just came off better with a low budget. And this director kind of took issue with them remaking it so soon after his, because he believed that if you're going to remake something, that you should remake something that you want to make better. And he didn't think they made it better. But the one good scene in Let Me In was the car crash scene, and it was the one scene that was different from Let the Right One In, and it was the only really good, really effective scene in the whole movie. So
Yeah.
I thought that one was kind of a waste of talent for a big studio cash grab.
Yeah. I would just check out the original. Has a lot more magic. There's a lot more magic to it.
And the next movie we're going to talk about is also in 2008. This one also called The Children, but it's nothing like the original one we talked about before in 1980. It just has the same name, and it's not a remake. And this one's from the UK. It's written and directed by Tom Shanklin, and he done mostly TV. I don't know why. I don't know why he didn't do more movies after this. But it's an ensemble cast of mostly unknowns. It's about a group of family members who go on a Christmas vacation, and each of their children go crazy and start killing the adults. This is accented by excellent character interaction, family drama, and family members turning on each other as they realize the children are killers. Now, that aspect of the killer kid tropes is done to perfection in this movie, I think, where you see you kind of see the family drama creeping in before the kids start killing, but it's very subtle. So then when they're put in a tense situation with the kids killing the adults around them, it turns into chaos, not just murdering chaos, but dramatic chaos because of the drama between the sisters and between the different family members. So you got the family members splitting off into factions. Some of them are trying to save the children, and others are realizing these kids are going to kill us if we don't kill them, and they're trying to kill the children, and they're constantly butting heads against each other. So this is one of the most realistic and effective killer kids movies. But the one thing some people complain about is there's no background. It doesn't show you how these kids turn murderous. There's no nuclear waste spill. There's no fog that comes and turns them evil. There's no devil that impregnates the moms and tries to get them to kill people. It's just kids who just automatically start murdering one day, and it is excellent. So everybody watch The Children 2008 is one of my favorites. And in the same year as another understated killer kid movie, Eden Lake, written and directed by James Watkins, who directed Woman in Black and and a couple Black Mirror episodes. And it stars Kelly Riley, who also was in Eli recently, another creepy kid movie. It's about a couple who goes on a romantic vacation and go camping on a remote lake where they're surrounded by obnoxious teens who soon turn murderous. Mm-hmm. This one's really intense, female-led film, and the kids are just as scary as they are obnoxious. One of the best.
The next one is probably one of the most popular ones, or at least for this generation.
Yeah, one of the best gems of killer kid movies in this generation is Orphan from 2009. Love this movie. It's directed by Spanish director Jaume Collet Serra, and he directed House of Wax, the remake of 2005, which I really like. He also did The Shallows, the only other great killer shark movie as far as I'm concerned besides Jaws. And he also did The Commuter with, oh my God, Liam Neeson. He did The Commuter with Liam Neeson. If you get a chance to check that out, I highly recommend it. It's just an action movie set on a train, but wow, is it intense and awesome. And so is Orphan. It's written by David Leslie Johnson, who also wrote one of my favorite horror films, The Conjuring 2. And it stars Isabel Fuhrman as Esther, Vera Farmiga and Peter Skarsgård as the parents who lose their baby and adopt a 9-year-old who is not only an unhinged murderer, but harbors a dark secret. This has to be one of the greatest reveals in killer kid movie history.
And this is one of those cases, we reported this on the podcast earlier in the year, where there was actually a similar case of something like this happening, just like in the movie. It was a little girl who was actually a lot older than she looked because the disease that she suffered from, it started exhibiting violent, psychotic, sociopathic behavior around the adopted family. So beware, this is something that apparently could happen, because I don't think it happened before the movie, but it happened after it came out.
Yeah. Could that woman have
life
gotten the idea from this movie?
Probably. Life imitates art sometimes.
And if you notice, it's in that way, it's kind of like Alice, Sweet Alice.
Mm-hmm. Something totally realistic that could happen.
Yeah, or the twist at the end.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I mean, I never really considered it because I just saw Alice, Sweet Alice. It's quite possible that was a big influence on Orphan. Again, I'm not sure, and I cannot neither confirm it, but I can't confirm or deny that. But I get the feeling that it might have been an influence on it.
So it's one of those that's technically not a creepy kid movie because she's not a kid. But as far as I'm concerned, if the audience thinks that it's a killer kid through the whole thing, then it's a killer kid movie.
And if you feel like we spoiled the movie, the spoiler's been going around the internet for over a decade, so get over it.
The next one is one that I haven't seen yet, but I do plan on seeing it after looking it up a little bit. It's Case 39 from 2010. It's directed by Christian Albert, who did Pandorum a couple of years later. And it stars Renee Zellweger and Ian McShane from John Wick, and also Bradley Cooper. It's about a social worker who thinks she is saving a 10-year-old girl from abusive parents, but the girl is not what she seems. Mm-hmm. Now that one, it came out, I thought it was just one of those cheesy Hollywood horror movies, so I never bothered watching it. And little did I know, it actually looks pretty good. I read some of the reviews on it. So that one's one that I need to catch up on.
Both of us.
Now, the next one probably no one knows about, but everyone should check this out. It's Wakewood from 2011. Completely flew under the radar. It's a little low-budget indie film written and directed by David Keating. It's about the parents of a 9-year-old girl who is killed by a savage dog get the chance to spend 3 days with their dead daughter by doing a pagan ritual. The question is, what happens when she's supposed to go back? Now this one, it's way better than it should be. It's got the charm and the quality and the scares of a much bigger budget.
Mhm.
And I think it comes off with a lot of class, a lot of genuine creepiness. This little girl is creepy. It's got some really good effects in it. So I highly recommend Wakewood. I believe this one's from the UK as well.
Well, the next significant one to come out was actually Citadel, and this one is from 2012. This is directed by Clarin Foy, who is a French filmmaker who also did, well, he's French. I wouldn't call him a French filmmaker. He also did Sinister 2 and Eli. And this is a synopsis for this one. A father who is suffering from agoraphobia teams up with the priest to rescue his daughter and take down a gang of feral and psychotic children who committed an atrocious act of violence against his family years ago. I haven't seen this one, but it seems like an exploitation movie. It sounds kind of salacious. I gotta check it out. I did enjoy Sinister 2. Not the best of the franchise, but it was a good one. I did not see Eli, though.
And this one's a lot like Them, where it's a group of older kids who attack these adults. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like an invasion, but this one, the Citadel's kind of set in a tall building, where the other one's set in a house, like a home invasion. Mm-hmm. But this one's another one, really atmospheric, really creepy, mm-hmm. and a lot of danger throughout the whole thing. So it's really heightened sense of tension throughout the whole thing. Yeah, good solid film.
The next one is probably one of the funniest ones in recent years. The next one is probably one of the funniest ones, or probably one of the most entertaining ones in recent years. This one is Cooties. This one is directed by two directors, Jonathan Millet and Carrie Murnion. And they also did Becky, which is a more recent creepy kids movie, but I'll get to that in a little bit. And they did another movie called Bushwick. I've never heard of it. It's also produced by Elijah Wood, who's been on a roll with producing a lot of horror, and starring Elijah Wood. It's about a mysterious virus that hits an isolated elementary school and transforms all the kids into mass savages. Basically, kind of zombies, though it's never spelled out that that's what they are, that they're actually zombies. An unlikely hero needs to lead a motley band of teachers to fight for their lives. And of course, it's pretty fucking hilarious. It's funny, it's clever, and it's definitely a horror comedy. It's heavy on the comedy. It's like it puts a lot of emphasis on that, but it doesn't really sacrifice any of the gore or the violence in favor of the comedy. It's filled with humor and wall-to-wall eviscerations and gore. And of course, it's disturbing to see little kids slightly mutated eating people up, and of course the fact that they have to fight back these little kids probably makes it a little more uncomfortable for some people, but it has like a playful anarchic spirit to it for me that I never felt disturbed by any of it.
Yeah, it's an excellent script. Really funny script from Lee Wynell, and shows his talent, and also a great performance by Lee Wynell. The guy can act too, and he's funny as hell. Yeah. So his acting was just as funny as his writing.
Yeah. Definitely worth checking out.
And whatchamacallit from The Office? Dwight from The Office.
Oh yeah, Rainn Wilson.
Rainn Wilson just going out and killing kids with reckless abandon. I love that part. He's the one that says, "I don't give a fuck. I'm gonna kill all these little bastards."
Yeah. So the next one is one that I started off the podcast with. I started quoting is Ouija: Origin of Evil from 2016, directed by the great Mike Flanagan, who also did Absentia, Hush, Oculus, Doctor Sleep, Gerald's Game, The Haunting of Hill House, The Haunting of Bly Manor, and a bunch of other stuff. As a producer I'm missing, but this is actually one that's a sequel to another movie, Ouija, which was a fucking awful movie. It's incredible that Mike Flanagan was able to take this IP and transform it into something so magnificent. It's in 1967 Los Angeles. A widowed mother and her daughter add a new stunt to bolster their seance scam business by inviting an evil presence into their home. Obviously, they don't realize how evil the presence actually is, and of course, as you'd expect, it ends up fucking with them. Now, the little girl in this movie is not actually evil. She's more being controlled by malevolent spirits. But just seeing a little girl deliver the type of speeches like the one that I gave at the beginning of this podcast is enough to make this one of the standout creepy kids films from recent years. And it's one of the few jump scare driven films that actually works.
Yeah, and it's a really good, solid period piece too.
Yep. Great period piece. It evokes the era. And I just think it speaks to Mike Flanagan's talent that he could take such a shitty movie and make a great sequel out of it. Not many directors would have the balls to try to take on a universally despised movie and try to improve it, but that's what Mike Flanagan did here.
Yeah, that's his only director for hire movie, where basically he was hired from the studio and they said, we want a scare fest rather than the slow burns that he was used to. And
he
man, did he delivered in spades.
Mm-hmm. The next one is actually last year we reviewed this on the podcast. It's called The Hole in the Ground. This one is directed by Lee Cronin. This is his first film. He's done mostly short films, but he also did 2 episodes of 50 States of Fright on Quibi TV. Quibi, which is right now flailing and failing, by the way. The show was produced by none other than Sam Raimi. Not a big fan of the Quibi concept, and I'm not really surprised that that app is starting to fall down. So in this, a single mother living in the Irish countryside with her son begins to suspect that her son isn't really her son at all, and she fears that his increasingly bizarre and erratic behavior is the result of a mysterious sinkhole in the forest behind their house. This is one of those creepy kids movies where it's totally cliche, very predictable, nothing original about it. It just follows a lot of well-worn tropes, but it hardly matters because it delivers the trope so well. And I think what makes this movie work is that, as cliched as it is, it's still done more effectively than a lot of horror movies before it that used the same formula, did not exploit it to the same level that this one did. And I think that's also a result of the directing style of the movie. It's a very polished piece of filmmaking. It's beautiful to look at, and I think it gives off the feeling of having a bigger budget than it actually does. And the little kid in this movie is efficiently creepy. Definitely one of the standouts.
Yeah, it's undeniably well made. That's the only complaint I would have about that movie. Is just not original. It has a lot of familiar tropes, but it does have original characters, and the execution is almost flawless.
Yep. And probably the last and the latest entry on the list is Becky. Now, this is directed by the same directors of Cooties, Jonathan Millot and Carrie Murnion, and they also directed Bushwick. This one, what is it about these directors? They seem to have a thing for wanting creepy kids in their movies. So, In this one, spunky and rebellious Becky tries to reconnect with her dad during a weekend getaway trip at his lakefront house. But the trip is turned upside down when a bunch of convicts on the run invade their home and cause chaos. I have not seen this one yet. I know it's a brand new movie. Where can we watch it at?
Right now, it's just on Redbox, and you can rent it from Redbox, or you can rent it on Amazon Prime. But I think it's $5.99 or something like that.
Yeah, so get it from Redbox then.
Yeah, because you can just pay a couple bucks and get it for Redbox. But I want to thoroughly discuss this on another podcast after you see it. But it's a really good movie. It's kind of like a horror version of Home Alone, where this kid just wrecks these big hulking white supremacist men.
That's what I've heard about it.
It's really satisfying. The violence is really satisfying. The performances are really good, and of course it's the same creepy kid from a Ouija Origin of Evil.
Yep, definitely.
So she's really coming into being a great horror actor.
Yep. And that is what we have for you today, folks. I would say it's a brief oral history of creepy kids on film. And as you can see, it's not really a subgenre, because I feel like this list covered every type of subgenre. They're supernatural movies, they're slasher movies, they're giallo movies. We try to mention some standouts from this list, and me and Mike may or may not agree about Children of the Corn being a standout, but I wanted to mention some ones that did not stand out. One of them is Little Evil. which I actually somewhat like. It was directed by Eli Craig, but I think it was a little bit of a come down for Michael, especially considering how good Tucker and Dale versus Evil was. I think you were expecting something a little bit more like that.
And it's also too much of an Omen parody.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I appreciate it for what it is, but I mean, it's not. It's not one of the best, and it's actually kind of forgettable. And in fact, if I did not see it on this list, I would have forgotten about it completely. Another interesting one is Z. Now, here's another thing. Z is another one where it's totally predictable. We've seen it all before, like Hole in the Ground. It's not quite as well made as Hole in the Ground is. Definitely not a standout, but for some reason, there is some shit in that movie that actually creeped me out. I think when it works very well.
It definitely has some moments in it for sure.
Moments that shock me. Then there's, of course, Brightburn, which is basically the Superman origin story, except he's evil with nothing really done original to add or to change it up or to really make it stand apart. Standard fare. Mike hated it. I have not seen it, but everybody that's described it to me has made it sound like a turnoff. It sounds exactly like what you described it as, Michael, so I've kind of put this one on the back of my list because I've heard nothing that great about it. And then we have The Prodigy, 2019.
That's one that uses all the tropes, just like Hole in the Ground did, but to much lesser effect.
Yeah. To much lesser effect. This one also had one of the weirdest openings that felt rushed and kind of nonsensical. It did have some effective moments sprinkled throughout. And I'll be honest with you, right now that I'm looking at Z and The Prodigy, I feel like I'm mixing elements of these movies together in my brain. I feel like I'm trying to differentiate which one is which, and I'm starting to mix them up. And I think that's how I know that The Hole in the Ground is a better version of a movie that uses the cliches and the tropes, because I saw that almost a year ago. I still remember it very clearly. Whereas Z and The Prodigy, which are relatively recent watches, have kind of blended together in my head, and I got confused about them as I was talking about them.
Yeah, and all these recently lackluster Killer Kid movies, it shows me that this isn't not like supernatural films where it seems like each decade the notable releases multiply. Mm-hmm. They don't, and it's really sporadic with Killer Kid films, but especially recently, it doesn't stop filmmakers from trying it again and again and just falling flat on their face. They rely too much on the tropes and don't try to do anything original, and they shy away from being too graphic, I think.
Yeah, it's kind of a trap to do a Killer Kids movie because it's trying hard to do something with Killer Kids outside of the established tropes. Got to be really imaginative. And then if you want to make up for it by having intense gore or violence, that's going to be called into question because it's about kids. So it's a tough genre. It's not an easy one to tackle. That's for sure. It presents a lot of challenges for a filmmaker. What's acceptable, what's not, how far you can go, when is it okay to avoid the cliches, when is it okay to lean into them. So I think I get why this one has become rickety in recent years. It's one that's kind of hard to take that trope and forge your own path or do something original with it. So I'm sure there is an original story there to be had with Killer Kids, one we haven't seen yet, but it's kind of hard to conceive of what that story would be. So I get why people end up, when they tackle these ideas, they end up falling on the tropes and kind of hope that the execution carries them along or sets it apart. Sometimes that works, like in The Hole in the Ground. More often than not, it doesn't.
Well, that's what I think what makes Becky so great, is it knows what the tropes are and it actively avoids them or goes completely around them, where you think you're approaching a trope and then it goes completely around it. And then it's not afraid to go there with the graphic violence and the gore.
One last thing, I think we should give Homer an honorable mention and a shout out.
Yeah.
Culkin's been on here because let's be pretty honest, the behavior that kid is engaging in towards the end of the movie, as justified as it is, it's a little too elaborate, and it's kind of you could tell that little Kevin McAllister is reveling in the torture that he's getting out. He's smirking at it and he's smiling. And he ends up calling the cops after he tortures them. And really, he knew they were coming, and he could have just called the cops and ended. Then we wouldn't have the movie, of course. But It's a little food for thought that Kevin McAllister is somebody you should watch out for when he grows up. He's already exhibiting disturbing behavior.
And the way he hurts those men.
And delightful, too.
Yeah, he gleefully hurts those men, and no matter how many times I watch it, each time I go back and watch it again, I'm always surprised at just how bad he hurts them.
Pretty funny, though. I'm not going to say it's pretty damn funny. But yeah, I have
brings the comedy.
Home Alone as a little shout-out because taken in a different direction, it could have been a horror movie. Definitely a horror movie.
So I wanted to say one more thing about creepy kid movies before we go. Through my research and through searching through all the different killer kid movies through the years, I ran across a few that look really good. They're well reviewed. They sound interesting. So I wanted to get off a little list of ones that I still need to watch. So you'll definitely be hearing me discuss these on later podcasts. The Blood on Satan's Claw from 1971. Devil Times 5 from 1974. The Little Girl Who Lives Down the Lane, which I can't believe I haven't seen yet, from 76. The Pit in 1981, which sounds a lot like A Hole in the Ground.
Joe Castro, who we had on the podcast, a great makeup artist, actually recommended that movie to me.
Oh, sweet. So definitely have to watch that one. The Devil's Child from 2007. Home Movie is a found footage killer kid movie from 2008. And then I can't believe I'm saying this, but I really want to see the remake of Bad Seed, starring Rob Lowe from 2018. It sounds like a remake of Bad Seed with Rob Lowe. It sounds like it's going to be horrible, but it actually sounds pretty good and got good reviews.
Doesn't Rob Lowe do mostly like Lifetime movies these days, or like that made-for-TV stuff?
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
So you'll be hearing me discuss that in the upcoming episodes.
So stay tuned into the podcast for the rest of the month. Next week, we're going to have a special on found footage films. Another one, we're going to be closing off the month with something. I'm surprised we didn't do this a long time ago. We're going to be closing off the month on Halloween with a review of the entire Halloween franchise. So not really a subgenre per se, but I'd say it's long overdue, and I think Halloween is as appropriate a time as any to tackle that franchise. And I'm sure we're going to have a lot to say.
Yeah, and make sure to tune in next week for that found footage episode, because we're going to go over some great found footage movies. It's become a rather interesting subgenre. It got a little saturated for a while, but then some gems ended up rising up out of it, including Be My Cat, Adrian Tofe's movie. And hopefully we're still going to have him in next week to discuss those movies with us.
Yes. Well, keep tuning in. Follow us on facebook.com/Pickles Horror Show. And also follow us on Instagram at Pickles Horror Show. Till next week, folks, happy horror.
Happy horror.